Well, hello and welcome to part 2 of the Ayahuasca journal on the Broderick Wallace channel, and hypothetical story of what might have happened to two people if they had have done what we are relaying in this story. Right, so where do we get to? So we're running through the list quickly and then we're going to fill in details later, and we are still dealing with the very first ayahuasca session on the 7th of January 2018. So now we get on to mouthpiece. So running through a list of just quick titles as an order of events that I made, which I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah,
It's been really useful, this. So mouthpiece is basically, I'm sure that we'll find this in the detailed notes. I don't know if she would have revealed her name yet. Let me have a quick look, see if it comes out in the text. Just a few seconds. Oh no, I'm sure that she told me her name. It wasn't in the first session, was it? It was later. It was after.
No,
It was in a dream. Yeah, this ties in with the idea that she was somehow integrated, because she told me the name that she would wish herself to be addressed by in a dream. What you might describe as a flashback in the common parlance. But it was a dream visitation, and I mean, obviously bear in mind this is predominantly an occult magical channel, so if you just happen to stumble across this video on the internet and it's like, whoa, they're talking about ayahuasca and then they're talking about magic and, you know, angel magic and hermeticism and all that, well, there's a reason for that. It's because that's the default point. Paganism, hermeticism, this is the default point. Ayahuasca is actually a side journey in our lives away from the core. Mm-hmm. Although it's really, really very important. And actually, no, I will say now, we'll get to it at a later point, but I will say that in this dream vision, take a sip. In this dream vision, you see, I asked the question, what's your name? Quite plainly. And she showed me a butterfly and a knife. And again, it was very Amazonian. It was like the butterfly was something that you'd see in the jungle. The knife was the kind of knife that you would imagine maybe on the person of an Amazonian Indian. And these two images, again, we talk about pictorial language, came together perfectly and succinctly as butter knife. So we'll just refer to her as butter knife from now on, although this information came later within the hypothetical experience, right? So basically, butter knife said, as the integration had taken place, and this fits our personalities very strongly as well, because, you know, this is we find ourselves to be opposites in many ways. We've got so much in common, but there are key ways in which we are opposite personalities, and we find this is kind of cool because we learn from each other, and we kind of like, you know, Mr Conor here might have a missing piece that I require, and there's a missing piece in myself that he may you know, wish to integrate, so we can learn from each other in this way. So these differences were playing out in the fact that he'd kind of like you were kind of blocked off and you'd sort of left the session in a way, just being an unsociable git. Right?
I'm very sociable, yeah. Actually.
And there was me, I'm like, I'm riding this baby. I'm like, come on, giddy up. So I'm like, yeah, you know, make me your shaman, I'm ready. And he's like, oh, just popping downstairs, put the kettle on. But you see, that's why he's more sensible than me. See, this is where it balances out. This is where over the years, he's been more sensible than me. So don't get me wrong. So she says to me, Butterknife says to me, you are now mouthpiece. I quite like that nickname. Broderick Mouthpiece Wallace. You are mouthpiece. And I shall speak through you. And Mr. Conor, when he comes back upstairs, or whatever he's doing down there, he is to ask the questions, and you shall be the voice. You shall be the oracle. So me, I'm sitting there and I am tripping joy with this. I am like, this has now become, remember the terms that I spoke about at the beginning of this part 2 video, the magical aspect. Of course it became magical because we are magicians, right? It became magical. I was able to channel this source of wisdom, this knowledge. In other words, almost straight away, the analogy of John Dee and Edward Kelly was immediately apparent. We talked about that at the time. Well, oh my God, it's like that. We have an angel here. We are channeling an angel, and perhaps I could have sat there and I'm sure I could have sat there and asked questions myself and received the answers, but that wasn't the point. That wasn't the way that things were to happen. It was specifically laid out. Mr. Conor is to ask the questions, and Mr. Wallace, you are to be the oracle, the mouthpiece. So we'll probably get to the and I've called this the oracular miracular, and also next to this I've written waves and coils, because this is how the experience played out, in bursts or in waves, as I previously described. It wasn't consistent. The strength of the oracle waxed and waned continuously. Like one moment he'd ask me a question and I'd be like, she's not there, she's gone. And then, oh, hang on, she's back. The coils of the serpent have returned. And then immediately I was like plugged into the universe. I would see like stars in my imagination, and planets and universes, and different cultures, and any question that he asked, I would have an explicit knowing. Remember that term in by the way, if you haven't seen it, we've made a video together already on the goddess of Bluebell Hill. You'll find that down in the videos. I'll look up the number and say that for the next one, perhaps, if I remember. Anyway, this explicit knowing, this form of communicating, not in a way that is direct speech, but is not only pictorial, but an explicit, just immediately, like, when you're just searching for, like, oh, I'm trying to remember that person's name, and then you go, you access silence for a moment, and then all of a sudden it appears. The information just appears. So, should we tackle some of the questions, the ones that we can remember?
Did we write any down, or is it just from memory?
There's lots. I mean, we've got. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Wow.
We got 6 pages for the first ayahuasca experience in the journal. So some of it's going to be here. You see, the way we're going to have to structure this is we do a basic run through first, and then we look at the detailed notes and say, oh, right, yeah, that happened. I remember that. And so we lay the structure first, and then we, then we fill in the gaps.
Yeah, because I have to say that I made a classic mistake, which is quite surprising actually, given the, given how major an experience this was, and I never journaled my own experience of this because it was so fresh in my memory for so long, but now it's not. So I can only remember a handful of questions that I asked and a handful of answers. So there's bound to be a lot of information in the notes that you've got.
Yeah.
That I've actually completely forgotten.
Yeah.
Which is actually going to be quite cool.
So we'll see the difference. Like, we'll try and remember what we can, and then we'll look at the detailed notes and see how perfectly it tallies and how much more extra information is there and what it unlocks from the memory.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is what I remember. This is, being put on the spot right now, not having lots of time to think about it. All the classic questions would be asked, like in terms of the evolution of mankind.
Yeah.
I was shown, and I would relay information about different how we evolved from a type of primate, and it wasn't too far away from your classic story of evolution, except for the fact that there seemed to be some kind of confirmation of a previous vision or experience that I'd had on Salvia Divinorum, that there is something different and special about humanity, that there is a seed of divinity planted within us, that we are a special creature. And this is a very Hermetic view anyway, and something that even though we're all dorks, don't get me wrong, we're also very special. We are different to the everyday stock, although very special in itself, of the animal and plant kingdoms, because we know that the plant kingdom is also intelligent.
We do now.
And as magicians as well, we will also say that the mineral world has its own intelligences.
It does.
In the form of elemental. There is an animistic quality going on there. So what I remember, there was one. I'm sure there were certain points where I was saying to you, ask questions about this subject, or ask, like, when the coils had retreated, because there's no way you would have come up with some of these questions unless so I'm sure about that now. I would, like, when the coils had retracted, I would say to Samuel here, ask questions about this subject or that subject. So when the coils come back, and I was like completely embedded, as the mouthpiece swept with the intensity of the substance, he would be able to interject with some of my questions as well as his own. So one of my questions that I remember in particular was something that I wanted to know, and that was, what's going on with Egypt? Because this was a big, well, always will be, but especially over a certain period, a massive passion of mine, ancient Egypt and the whole, who built the pyramids, and what was really going on in deepest antiquity. I'm trying to think of the correct terminology. The early pyramid age and all this kind of stuff. So I remember she said that Egypt had provided the universal system, if you like, with an extremely valuable set of evolved souls. So what she was saying was, Egyptian civilization is certainly not any stereotype that we could access within our minds, or that we are already conscious of. It's definitely different to anything that has been arrived at theoretically. She didn't go into those differences because that probably would have taken a lot of time. So she said basically they're different to how you might think, these ancient Egyptians, but they are spiritually superior, and through the knowledge that they had and the processes that they went through, they have provided extremely evolved souls which still exist within a wider spiritual ecology, which I think is awesome, actually.
It is,
yeah. So what an amazing answer to that question. I don't think we got onto how the pyramids were built, and it's like, oh, why didn't we ask that?
The problem is in this situation, especially when one of you is serving as the medium and the other asking the questions, is that if you're, who could be prepared for that scenario, you're going to find it very difficult to you're going to find it very difficult to know what questions to ask. It's a bit like being put on the spot. Theoretically, I should have been scribing this all down, but when the person asking the questions is no longer psychically engaged with the entity, it's very difficult to sort of keep that interaction strong. So bearing in mind that I'd purged and I'd kind of gone back to a normal state of consciousness almost, it's very difficult to say to someone on the street, can you kind of provide some direction on my sort of state of trance that I'm in, because I'm just experiencing it and I need you to it's just not going to work. They're going to go, I can't, So in a way it was very difficult for me to ask questions, and as much as I had a plethora of questions I want to ask, it just wasn't happening.
I can liken this to limitations makes you more creatively productive as a musician. Like if you've got the band consists of 2 guitars, bass, vocals, drums, and there's no keyboards. This is the band. That's what you have to work with. You'll come up with a lot of material very quickly, because you won't have the whole mind stress of are we allowed keyboards? Can we have samples? Can I get a saxophonist on this weird section of the song? No, you've just got those the 5 usual elements. So it's a little bit like that, like having an unlimited creative or extrapolative capacity sort of stultifies you. It's like you're a deer caught in the headlights. It's like, what do you want to know? Anything.
Yeah, and part of you's just already starting to think about
and you're like, straight away it was like Egypt. So one of the other questions concerning Egypt, which is something that I really wanted to know concerning the pyramids actually, was what's the deal with Orion? And as we know, the Orion correlation theory, that whole fascinating shebang, and Orion being Osiris, and the pyramids in Giza, the Great Pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure, those 3, Orion's belt, that whole kind of thing. It was like, yes, it's Osiris on the ground. Yes, it's true. That's what it is. That was confirmed within our hypothetical experience. It was confirmed. And so it was like, well, what's the deal with Orion? And the answer was, I am a mother amongst mothers, and Orion / Osiris is a father amongst fathers. So this evolved or unfolded visually within my mind as, okay, so you're a mother amongst mothers, which means you are Mother Earth. So Butterknife, Mother Ayahuasca, was saying, I am more than just this plant. I am, whether she is actually, or she has access to, or she is an emanation, or what would the correct term be in terms of when smaller gods are, well, gods are an aspect of the god. So it's a little bit like your polytheism, monotheism thing. In some way, shape or form, she is the whole of the planet. She is Mother Earth. She is nature. It seems that there's something special about the Amazon and this plant that has, through its own cultural trappings, captured and emanated Mother Earth, if you like.
Yeah. And also, I'm starting to remember now how I felt coming up with questions in this scenario. Basically, I only felt like I was able to ask questions within a certain field, and maybe that's just the way that the experience unfolded, is that as you got a couple of answers, you wanted to ask more questions about those subjects, and there's just not the time to ask questions about a vast range of subjects. So once we were on Orion, once we were on
the mother and father thing, this started expanding, didn't it?
Yeah, so we just had to, because
and we will get to this in a moment.
And the answers aren't ever going to be elaborately explained, and there's not going to be a lot to record. So you have to keep asking questions on the same thing. So if you were to want to cover a range of subjects in an ayahuasca session, you'd probably need like 8 hours, So in this situation, being blindsided by the whole situation as well, you just felt like you wanted to ask more questions on the same subject. So, but I did think to test, well, not test her, but to find out where her understanding ended. So I asked a question about mushrooms, didn't I? Because I wanted to know about psilocybin mushrooms, and it's like, what is going on with mushrooms? Could you tell us what sort of, psychically, what is going on with the mushroom experience, and are they part of her sphere of consciousness?
Basically,
are they part of the ecosystem?
Is the same intelligence being channeled through different substances, or are you separate beings? And it seemed to arrive at that they are separate beings.
She said, don't know, alien. That's what she said. Yeah.
Oh right, yeah. Don't know, alien. Yeah. So the mushroom is an alien, in the opinion of Butterknife, who was Mother Ayahuasca.
Yeah.
So again, another sort of Terence McKenna tie in there that seemed to come up really strong. But we should get back to the Osiris, Orion, mother-father thing. So she was saying that she is the Mother Earth, and that we are her children, and that she is somewhat stressed and concerned about the environment and the destructive capacity of mankind and everything that's going on that we know about with ecological collapse and all this kind of thing. So this is another subject. Charlie's, every time you keep we've got this one and that, it's hard to. This is why I had to take notes. This is why we kind of put this off for so long, because it's just, it's a lot. So she's Mother Earth. Now, if you've got a mother and you've got a father, then that implies some kind of, and we're her children, it implies some kind of family. It implies some kind of sexual act, if you like. Now, the sexual act comes in when we, and this, bear in mind, all this information was relayed through visions, and I will have to say that I did, to be completely genuine and honest here, I did have a realization many years ago, after reading a wonderful book called When the Gods Came Down by Alan Alford, that as above, so below, there is a tally between sperm and meteorites. Meteorites seed planets the way that sperm seed wombs. The womb can be, it's like, there is an analogy between a womb and a planet, especially with the roundness thing. You imagine a sperm breaking the wall of the sorry, I don't mean the wall, I mean the egg, the roundness of the egg. Sorry about that. So the roundness of the egg, this is like the planet. The sperm breaking the barrier is like the meteorite hitting the atmosphere of a planet, and this meteorite contains DNA in some form or another whereby life can start. This is how life is propagating around the universe.
Yeah.
So basically what she was saying was, now, and I know this sounds terrible, but she's kind of sort of showing me what I already know and saying, yeah, that's the thing, that goes on, that's true. Which shouldn't be too surprising, because how else would it bloody well? How else is life going to get around the universe, unless Ridley Scott was onto something with the with those great big bald,
Geiger paintings.
Weird, what are they called again?
I don't know what they're called.
Not the architects, come on. What is it, it will come back later.
Oh.
Big baldy men who like to, muck around with, you know, who like to get their icky goo. They're into icky goo. Right. Yeah. Anyway, right.
I'm lost.
Right. Yeah.
But just on the point, you talked about, well, that correlation or that analogy, and isn't that the panspermia? Is that
Panspermia is the name, yeah.
And a big advocate of that was Francis Crick, and Francis Crick was obviously the gentleman that discovered DNA. The DNA code managed to decipher that, and he actually was only able to do that because he took psychedelics. So there's a nice little pattern
and
there.
the DNA is rather like the serpent, which is rather like the caduceus, which is all of these things. They tally somehow, some way.
Yeah.
Waveforms, psychedelics, evolution, panspermia, intelligence, consciousness. It's all, you know, the mind. All these things are related in a way. It's so they're not. It's like it's all building up, and we're like, yeah, I get it, but I can't quite explain it properly. But I see it, I feel it, and this actually come up in an interview recently with Richard Dawkins, where he was poo-pooing the notion that one could intuit DNA from the image of the caduceus in psychedelic visions, or something very similar to that. So I just say poo-poo that.
Definitely.
Come on, what do you know, mate? What do you know? Come on. You haven't put yourself there. And anyway. So, the mother-father thing, we still haven't tackled it, have we? So, Osiris being the father, Mother Earth, Mother Ayahuasca, butter knife in brackets, being the mother of us, humanity here, seeded through panspermia. So if the earth is the egg, and that's her, she's the mother, and a mother amongst mothers, which means there are other planets out there which also contain their own life systems. We are not the only one. Then what's seeding them? Orion / Osiris, a father amongst fathers, his sperm, which is the meteorites, asteroids, whatever, I think it's meteorites is the correct term. Now we know that Orion is a very active area in the sky for meteorite, you know, it's active with meteorite activity. So again, it all seems to tally that perhaps life on Earth, and I would put my money on this definitely, that life on Earth was seeded by a meteorite coming from that area of the sky, because I think that's encoded in the mythology here. And you know, on a personal level, you know, I mean, you can't give this to someone. I appreciate, you know, we're two guys chatting on a video and everything, but like it for me, it's like it all makes sense, and it makes enough sense whereby I can look up at that area of the sky and I'm like, that's Big Daddy up there, Mother under our feet, we're the children. It's a sexual thing. It's about love. You know, this word love tends to, which is more about desire and attraction, which ties in with the elemental frameworks that we encounter in the occult world, as in fire, water, air being the attraction between the two, earth the solidifying. It's a love thing. It's what you might call wholesome lust, and this is expressed poetically and beautifully in the mythological tales. And this won't only be Egypt, I'm sure. You know, this is just a classical example because Egypt's so beautiful, and it's just its energy is up so high. We know, but I mean personally, I'm more taken with the missing mythology of my own native country. I'm definitely more interested and more captured by that sort of pagan, druidic, Germanic, Norwegian, that whole European. I find that more aesthetically pleasing, and it resonates with me. But you see, Egypt is so powerful. I mean, you just have to say. You imagine a druid standing there, and I'm sure that that these beings existed, and this will get too close to another subject, but they were able to harness an internal manner through certain processes whereby they really were magicians. But I believe that it was, if we think of the trappings of paganism as opposed to the trappings of civilization par excellence, to channel a Frenchman there, Egypt is civilization par excellence. Look at the pyramids. I mean, you have to admit, you know, whatever wisdom you've got going down, those pyramids, they end arguments, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, I know I've been there. You just have to stand in front of them, and they end arguments, and you're like, yep, these guys knew what was going on. And I don't think that the answers lies in spectacle or technical knowledge. I think that the true answers lie in within an internal process that doesn't need large structures or infrastructure. I can't think of the right word in my mind. So everything equals out in the end anyway. But there's something about Egypt where, you know, you're on ayahuasca. It's like it's going to come up. You know, you need to know the enduring power of ancient Egypt.
Yeah, and let's not forget that we're two Western Europeans in England having a dialogue with a South American jungle consciousness, and we're talking about, well, a 5,000 to 10,000 year old civilization in the Middle East. So there's a definite feeling of a kind of, well, a sense of unity,
yeah,
pervading or permeating through everything. So although it comes with its own flavour of the jungle, it doesn't, you know, that's not the thing that kind of, that's like, not the vibe you get left with. You get left with a much
universal
deeper,
yeah. It's like her heart is in the jungle. That's you know, that's the point of expression. But beneath that, beneath the, you know, the robes of mystery, if you like, beneath the veil is the goddess of the planet.
Because there was one question that I wished I did ask, and it's one that we both know we haven't got the answer to yet, was there a plant access point indigenous to Britain or Western Europe that does the same thing? And if you'd have looked at, I know we're getting off the subject a little bit, but if you'd gone to druidic techniques or experiences, like the fly-agaric mushroom was the only thing that we can come up with.
And the magic mushrooms, what are they called?
The psilocybin.
Psilocybin, yeah.
And as we know...
But there must have been more, and that knowledge has been burnt at the stake.
But as we know, or have been told in this ceremony, that the psilocybin mushrooms in particular were mentioned as not being of this planet. So there is I'm just kind of pursuing my own thoughts as they go along now, but there is an argument to say that in order to access particular areas of knowledge or particular information, you need to, if you want answers that are not of this world, then you need to use something not of this world, you know.
Yes, and that ties in beautifully. I was going to say, even though she is so wider than the Amazon, she's bigger than that, she was still restricted to the earth within the answers she gave to questions, where she was kind of looking out from the earth, so she knew what Orion was. She could say, yep, father amongst fathers, I'm a mother amongst mothers. She could look out, she could see it, but she couldn't get into the fine details. There were questions that Samuel would ask whereby she'd say, I can't see that far.
Yeah, I remember asking.
So there was a limitation.
I don't know if it was about other solar systems, or because we were pursuing this particular line of questioning, and there was a limit to the sphere of knowledge. It would only go so far. So
and all this, there was a thread running through the whole thing, which was stress concerning the environment, which was like she loves humanity so much. Like you can imagine her, you know, in the Amazon, being the mother of the tribe, and so much wisdom and love coming from her in terms of her integration. And when you think about the plant, evolutionary speaking as well, it's an adaptive quality to have that much to have that much utility, if you like. It's an adaptive quality, although I do believe those terms are a little bit cold, and I don't go there completely, because what is the evolutionary adaptability of a completely full, you know, excuse my spitting at the camera, psychedelic experience? Like, if you're going to get down to like, oh, it's what we need, evolutionary speak, it's more than what we need. It doesn't explain all the beauty and the richness of experience, and, you know, the whole, all of these shamanic technologies, which we would include magic and yoga and all these kinds of things. It's more than just evolutionary. It goes way beyond what we need in terms of, you know, fucking fighting, finding food and shelter, and not being eaten by animals. It goes way beyond that. Although you do have to say that these terms are useful within certain areas, in terms of, we could say that a plant has evolutionary adaptability in terms of its usefulness to the tribe. So that ties in with her concern over the fact that humanity are destroying the planet, in her view. I mean, I can only take it on face value. I mean, I see, you know, you breathe in the smog from traffic, you see how ugly, you know, how ugly civilization is in the modern sense. You're like, okay, I buy into it, but I can't really feel it viscerally like she can, as within this story, if you like, that she is the planet. She's feeling it. She's feeling the concern for her children and what her children, you know, are doing, which ultimately threatens her survival as being a mother goddess confined. At least, you know, a large or a significant portion of her form is encapsulated within the planet itself. Who knows what would happen maybe if the planet, obviously Earth won't be around forever, so I should think that she has, well, I'm certain that she has a soul that will go on to serve some other purpose at some other point, or to be integrated, whatever. You know, it's not going to die, is it? In the larger sense, which is a really interesting question. It could open up all kinds of extrapolations. But it's just saying, don't kill me. Don't kill yourselves, you're killing me. Which was going to lead me on to, because I know we have to wrap up soon, because we're about to have dinner cooked by Mr Connor's lovely wife here, so we have to wrap up this part 2 very soon. But this is another key thing I want to stress in this video, and that is extinction. Actually, should we leave? Do we have to wrap this one up? No.
Quite soon. All I remember is,
yep.
I remember asking a question about the fate of the human race. Quite a blatant question, and I just got one answer through Broderick, and it was, one day all of mankind will die. But there are different interpretations to that answer, because we all know that we are all going to die, and irrespective of how well we live our lives, every person will die. So it was an answer that was kind of obvious, but whether that meant the race from a permanent perspective, or will just simply die from this plane of existence by some sort of form of spiritual evolution. Obviously we can go on and on with this into the night. So.
I mean, from a wide point of view, it's implied that although physically we will die, there is a harvesting going on, and an evolution in terms of spiritual evolution, spiritual ecology.
Yeah. And it's certainly, in my opinion, looking like from an ecosystem point of view.
It's a bit like me being concerned. I don't want to die tomorrow, but I know I'm going to die eventually. I'm saying let's preserve this. There's something we need to do, or I will accept eventually my appropriate time.
Yeah,
So,
and just over the back of this orchard are some raspberry fields, and at the moment, for the next couple of years, they're not going to plant anything in them. They're not going to plant anything in them because if they do, it just needs to be left alone, you know. And in my opinion, the planet is reaching a point where it needs to be left alone for a while. So it might be necessary that there is no, it just gets to have a break from people. Not forever, but if you look back through hundreds of thousands of years of human history,
it's a bit like
it does need a break.
The end of the last ice age, the cataclysm. It's
Yeah.
like, just chill those monkeys, those, well, monkeys, I don't really like that term too much. Those hominids, those homo eroticus, whatever we're called, right? Just, clear out, that's it, just whittle them right down, and they're not making quite so much noise now for a little bit. Let nature grow back, come back. It's a little bit like that, isn't it?
I think so. I think we can see a fluctuation in balance, but obviously this is coming into like personal ideas about what's good for the planet and how much it can cope with how destructive we are. But
but if you ask us to, we'll always say let's have less people, a bit more quiet. I'm in the mood for some adventure, but there is a time to I do like a little bit of thinking time, a little bit of me time.
We've seen with the notion of, we've talked about the notion of waves and fluctuations. Like there are always going to be expansions and contractions, and the death that we're talking about, because as we'll see from subsequent ayahuasca ceremonies, we do get a bit more onto the subject of death, and in its very pure sense, and maybe that's a good point to leave it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll wrap up now by saying, we will eventually arrive more specifically at the point of death from an invading perspective, talking about different intelligences, or intelligences, compartmentalized within different arenas. Eventually the experience will be gate crashed.
Yeah.
But anyway, that we will get to that eventually, but in the next video we will start with, and I'll just make a little note here so I don't forget. Extinction.
You said that just like Terence McKenna as well. How fitting.
Well, that's a wrap for now. Part 2 done. I think we'll be seeing you at part 3.